Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Sheryl McCumsey, founder of Pesticide Free Alberta. She now lives on the Sunshine Coast in British Columbia. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Jim.
Sheryl, you've just put a petition up live online. What's the petition? What's it about?
Well, it's a federal petition. If anybody wants to look it up on the House of Commons website, it is E2738. And basically it says in the petition to our Minister of Health, because the Minister of Health oversees the Pest Management Regulatory Agency, which is a department within the Ministry of Health, that we do not consent and we're opposed to the use of herbicides as well as their surfactants in the forestry industry, applied by the forestry industry, which is detrimental to the environment, local flora and fauna, water sources, and so on. We also feel that this is increasing the risk to forest fires, which will accelerate climate change, and it also is a risk to loss of economic value. It's a threat to communities and the overall health of Canadians. So I feel that this petition is very clear. There is a lot of evidence to support all of these claims, and a lot of people are quite outraged when they find out this is even going on. Most people don't even know. You can't even say they have informed consent because most people don't even know this is going on and are appalled when they find out.
Now, how long has BC been spraying, and why does the BC government think it's necessary?
Well, the BC government allows it. I don't know if we could say that they feel it's necessary. The forestry industry views our forests as tree plantations. It's even kind of in the wording of these plans that they submit to the Ministry of Environment. The wording is basically that they talk about trees as crops, and they talk about other trees like deciduous trees and berry bushes as pests. They actually use that language. It's a mindset, a total mindset about growing one kind or two kinds of trees as a crop in our forests. So they're not viewed so much as forests as they are as tree plantations. And that's coming from the forestry industry. Most of them, I would say, view it this way. It's not, some companies do more harm than others. I mean, some do aerial spraying and some are doing spraying by backpack. But when you actually look at all of this and in the big picture, the amount of spraying that's going on across Canada is massive, and it's basically turned our forests into carbon emitters instead of carbon sinks, because we've removed deciduous trees basically over a period of time. To say exactly when this started, I believe it would have been, I've been told 1986. I'd have to look that up to be sure that that's the correct date, when the mandate was to replace what was removed when we were harvesting trees. But it's not exactly that clear cut. It's not like we removed these trees and that's what we replace, all of the same trees, because we're not harvesting maple and alder, even though these can be quite valuable in certain situations. If we were to open up the economy to different kinds of ways of harvesting trees for different kinds of jobs, for example, like I have a maple coffee table in my living room. I have maple furniture in my house. So it's kind of like, it's complicated, but spraying in our forests could stop today. We don't do it in Quebec and haven't since 2002, so we could stop doing this, and it would reduce a whole bunch of risks right off the bat. We need other changes to happen to stabilize an industry that's going to go down the tubes pretty quickly the way it's going. I mean, in fact, BC is subsidizing this industry to the tune of $360 million per year. We're not actually getting anything out of it for the last 10 years. So it's not really paying our bills, and people are losing jobs the way things are being done. But forestry spraying is just ridiculous. I mean, there's just nothing sensible about it. We're told all kinds of things. People massage the language, but it makes no sense the more you look at it.
How has it worked out for Quebec, who stopped spraying 18 years ago?
Well, basically, in the reports that I have been able to find, what's happened is it's increased some of the work because you can manually brush trees, which, you know, there's certainly more discussion that needs to happen around that. But when you manually brush a tree, it's a whole different game as opposed to spraying it, which does a lot of other multiple harm, like to the soil, to the water, to the drying out of the vegetation, etc. But what happens is that you increase the work, which means more jobs. And when you look at these companies and how much they're making in profit, they can probably afford to hire a few people. And right now, that's a big concern for a lot of people living in this province and across Canada is having work. So we need to diversify what we do with our harvesting and forestry and increase jobs for the public as opposed to basically destroying ecosystems, which will have a significant cost and is having a significant cost right now.
We'll have more with Sheryl McCumsey right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Cypress Development Corp. is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp. trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Sheryl McCumsey. Sheryl, what are some of the health risks of spraying these harsh chemicals around?
Well, I mean, in general, I've seen that the forestry industry uses 4 herbicides, and one that everybody is very familiar with that's sprayed airily in other places, not particularly in our neighborhood here, but certainly in BC, is glyphosate. And the lawsuits initiated in the U.S., which is, you know, now we're looking at Bayer, who's taken on the purchase of Monsanto and glyphosate's issues. It's been revealed in the courts that the studies used were fraudulent and that they hid evidence of cancer. But cancer is really maybe not the biggest thing here. Glyphosate is registered as an antimicrobial. It's going to have an impact on the soil and the microbes in the soil and pretty much every living thing in a negative way that will actually impact your crop species, if we're going to call them crop species, of trees as well. And I mean, the more you look, things like maple, for example, which may, you know, kind of overshadow a spruce or pine tree or whatever, the leaf matter from these trees when they fall off the tree is going to feed the forest floor. So we're not even really talking about the soil, for example. So it's like a cascading of events. You've got another issue where all pesticide applicators are required to rinse out their containers. It's required that they rinse out their containers 3 times with fresh water. Well, where are they going to do that? Are they going to do that in the backcountry beside a stream where that goes into the water where they're not supposed to spray near? Or are they going to do that when they come into town and contaminate local water? Nobody knows. Nobody knows where that's happening. That's just one issue. But besides being linked to cancer and kidney disease and liver disease and so on, all of these studies that are coming out, there's just so many of them. Some of these other herbicides also have pretty horrific, links to certain diseases as well. Cancer still being another one of them, and again, kidney disease and liver disease and so on. And the impacts to wildlife and reproductive systems and the endocrine system. I mean, it's like we have this mindset that, a poison, we can use a poison. We don't really need to worry about who's researching it. We don't need to actually research the product and all its additives, which are sometimes as toxic or more toxic, or even look at the breakdown products of these pesticides. The breakdown products are often as harmful, like in glyphosate, for example, as harmful, and they don't go away. The breakdown products are the breakdown products. So we're kind of like, we treat pesticides like they're fairy dust and they just disappear. They don't just disappear. And they have inputs of a cascading of events. And then we wonder why we have insect problems. Well, it's the same thing in a great big field of one crop. You're going to have insect problems and you're going to have to use insecticides. And so if you're going to grow one tree over a vast area, I don't know how many times we have to learn this lesson. You're going to have insects. You're going to have nothing to stop that insect from ripping through your forest. If you have deciduous trees in an area in that forest, you may prevent the spread of that insect ripping through your forest. I mean, there's just, a person could talk for hours and hours and hours about all the multiple impacts. So, we could look at the health impacts of if it gets into our water, which of course eventually is going to get into the watershed when you look at the half-life being anything like the companies will say 45 days. Well, are we going to have a hard rain maybe in that 45-day time frame? Probably. But if it persists a little longer than that, like we see in some studies, 2 or 3 years, is it going to get into our water system? Well, probably, but who's looking? Nobody's really looking. Are we worried about it? Well, I guess we're not really worried about it. So we got those health impacts, but if you're increasing your risk to forest fire and you got smoke all summer long, well, everybody knows that there's health risks with breathing in smoke. People do die every year from their impacts of smoke, from, lung problems that people have that make them more susceptible, people who have heart problems and so on. This is a real risk to human health in so many different ways. It's hard to count them all. And would you like to be in a forest? I've heard stories of people being out there and being near where an aerial spraying was going on. Maybe not, where I'm living, but certainly in Canada, pretty horrific to think of that kind of thing going on. Does a worker want to be doing manual work, or does a worker want to be spraying pesticides in the backcountry? And is he going to be full up wearing all this gear to protect himself from it when it's hot outside? So, yeah, it's hard to list all the impacts to human health, but they're multiple and they're convoluted, but they're certainly there. The arguments to do this is just incredibly ridiculous, really.
We'll have more with Sheryl McCumsey right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Sheryl McCumsey. Sheryl, I just saw a report where a lot of people are concerned that the human birth rate is dropping dramatically. Could this widespread use of herbicides, not just in British Columbia and Canada, but across the planet, be connected to this?
Absolutely, it is. I mean, it's hard to point your finger at one thing. I mean, because there's so many things going out into our environment. It's incredible, really, and kind of scary. It's better to try to simplify your life to reduce your exposure, period, to all kinds of toxins, because so many of them are impacting the endocrine system, which is reproductive issues. And it's really important to note that when your reproductive abilities decline, it's a clear indicator of overall health. It's not just your reproductive abilities, it's your overall health. So yeah, we need to scale back on how many people are living on this planet, but there are better ways. I mean, most wealthier countries, women have fewer children when their education goes up. So there's better ways of controlling the population if we want to look at it as a positive or a negative. But definitely the decline in our reproductive health is huge, huge. And there's studies showing, again, links to several different pesticides and reproductive health. I mean, this is just one, again, of many impacts on our health. And when you know how many of those pesticides are out there, like, I mean, canola can have 4 different neurotoxic pesticides sprayed on it, for example. We don't know what that does. We don't know what mixing up all that stuff in whatever amount it is. The issue is that we don't test or look at combinations of pesticides. We just don't do that. So when, even in the backcountry, they could possibly be mixing more than one herbicide together, and we don't even know what that's going to do. So, like, when we talk about science and everything, it's quite incredible that we're talking about how people are opposed to this or anti-science when it's absolutely the opposite. It's all about what the science is telling us and has been for years, that these things are hurting us. They're hurting us, and if we don't change it, there ain't going to be any humans. There isn't going to be any bees. There isn't going to be any ecosystem to sustain us. And our forests are basically the lungs of the planet. If we want to simplify things a little bit, we really need our forests on multiple planes of survival, basically. And if we create big tinderboxes all around the planet, well, how long do you think we're going to last? It's just insane. So I almost kind of lost my train of thought there.
Well, biodiversity, how about just humans? Perhaps if people don't care about plants or little critters, how about those critters who drive cars and live in houses? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, yes, we're making ourselves sick, and because we can't exist here independently from all of this as much as we might think that we can. I mean, I think this mindset that's kind of been growing in our societies has happened from our belief that we have control over everything, that we can control everything, and we really can't. I mean, you could be a billionaire and you could get stuck in a hurricane somewhere and not survive it. I mean, we just don't have control over everything. What we need to do is start having a little more respect, because if we don't, we just aren't going to survive ourselves. But spraying pesticides in forests, it's just crazy. I mean, I could justify, it's like taking antibiotics all the time. Like, would anybody do that? Like, why would you do that? If a doctor said to you, hey, antibiotics are registered by Health Canada, so I want you to take this antibiotic every day for the rest of your life, just in case you get sick, and then you'll have it in your system. Well, we know that's crazy, because it won't even work when the disease comes around if you've been taking it all the time. Well, why have we gone from thinking that maybe we can spray a little weed here or a little weed there to like literally spraying our forests now, aerially in some places, and then justify even spraying it by backpack and not really thinking this through. It's just crazy. We have to start thinking about it because otherwise we're not going to survive this for very long. I mean, I know from when I was a young person, I used to drive a car and all the insects splattered over my windshield are not there anymore. They're just gone. You can do any study you want out there, but those insects are gone and we need them to pollinate our crops, to prey on the insects that eat our crops, etc. If it's all about just us, we're kind of being selfish to this extent is insane. It's just insane.
Now, I'm trying to recall whether it was Paraguay or Uruguay. I'm sorry if I get the guays mixed up, but they've been using genetically modified plants for about 12 years, and what happened was it has turned the weeds in that country into what they call Frankenweeds that are so sharp and pointy they're puncturing tractor tires. And in my entire life of living on a farm, we never had one flat tire. So these must be pretty noxious things if they can take out a tractor tire. And they say it's now overwhelming their agricultural system where they can't grow anything decently, but they sign these long-term contracts with Bayer, formerly Monsanto, and they can't get out of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have problems like this in Canada, maybe not quite as bad as puncturing your tire, but, you know, we have some pretty gigantic weeds that when you cut them, the liquid that comes out of the stalk of that plant will give you pretty horrific burns. You've probably heard of those plants. Hogweed?
Hogweed. Yeah,
pretty nasty. And if you cannot, if you broadcast with genetically engineered crops, this has been the thing that's really increased the use of herbicides. I don't care what anybody says. When you actually look at the data, it's quite clear that genetically engineered crops has increased herbicide use because you've designed them to tolerate being sprayed with it. Now, come on. Are we going to use some common sense on that? So now you're spraying it on the plant when the plant's growing and the plant doesn't die, whereas before it would. So if you look at the pesticide sales reports, it's massive, the increases that we have. So now you're spraying it all the time, whether really the weed is a huge issue or not. You have one genetically engineered plant. There's no diversity there. None whatsoever. And so you're going to be more susceptible to other problems. I mean, there's multiple problems with this technology, but we're just talking about very simple things. So now you're spraying a lot of this herbicide, and even if you were going to justify the use of herbicides, now you have weeds that have developed resistance because you're using it so much more often. I mean, I've heard some farmers tell me they've seen a neighbor spray it 7 times. 7 times! Who's watching all of this, you know? We're not seeing it because we're in the cities and these guys are out in the country, and some farmers do things differently than other farmers for sure, but you know, the more weed resistance you get, the more you spray, and then you got to mix your pesticides. So now we're seeing, you know, glyphosate being mixed with 2,4-D and glyphosate and dicamba, and these pesticides are more volatile, dicamba, for example. So now we're seeing other farmers losing their crops. Like in the U.S., farmer lost his peach orchard, was just wiped out from the dicamba. So it's like, so where does this stop? Now we have a new genetically engineered crop designed to tolerate 5 different herbicides. 5. Wow. Where does that end? When we look at other ways of growing food, they exist, and you can go to farms and witness it yourself. Why are we continuing on this one track that has no end? It's like a drug addiction. It's really, really sad, and it's not going to end well because it doesn't just kill the weeds. It doesn't just stay and disappear like fairy dust into the ether. It hangs around. We end up getting it into our bodies, And we know some of the effects of that, but we don't know even all of the effects of that. It's not going to end well. It's, we already know that synthetic fertilizer is not working very well anymore. We've doubled that, but not our crop output. And we see, farmers being impacted by hail in Alberta, which is pretty horrific. But at the same time, I often wonder about those fields and how deadpan that soil might even be in some places, because when you keep adding chemical like that and nothing else, that soil's, we're losing soil, which is the most important thing.
I saw a report that said we're losing 1% of our topsoil a year. That doesn't sound like a lot, but in 10 years, you've lost 10% of your topsoil. Where are we going to grow the food to feed everybody?
Well, yeah, when you're importing a lot of it, like, I'm sorry, but canola is not feeding the world, people. It is not. And, the farmers that are feeding us are growing a variety of things on their farm. The mixed farmers, right? Some farmers almost have like a little ecosystem on their farm. Though the small organic farmers are the ones that save this planet, literally. It's not all the big crops out there and we've become so focused on this, but it's really doing us harm in so many ways. It's the small farmers that are going to save this planet. And so we should be supporting them every way we can all the time. Go to the farmers market. And right now, some of them are struggling a little bit with COVID, the way things have kind of, impacted their ability to get workers and their ability to even sell their product. We need to be out there supporting them like crazy, because when we can't import food because we have another pandemic or something, or because there's not workers, or because of climate change, we have so many multiple impacts happening at the same time. We've got soil loss, we've got the loss of pollinators, even our food itself. I mean, there's people out there talking about the loss of nutrients in our food. Well, the loss of nutrients in our food is because of what we're doing to the soil. You can't just put 3 chemicals into the soil and expect that's going to feed us. No, it might only work. It'll work for a little while. You'll see a big jump up. But it's the biodiversity in our soil, the microbes in our soil, just like our gut. It's exactly the same kind of analogy, and incredibly important in our forests in the same way. We just are viewing things in such a simplistic fashion about how we grow things and how we replace things. And it's just a little more complicated than that.
Well, there's also this attitude some people have: science is evil. Oh my God, if a scientist says it must be wrong, or there's some kind of political agenda behind it.
Well, I think some people feel this way now because, some scientists are funded by big corporations, and they're unfortunately, our universities should be publicly funded like they used to be, instead of funded by someone with a self-interest, basically, to sell something. Because then you're not really doing science for the betterment of mankind, you're doing it to sell a product. So there is good reason to question science in general, I guess. I mean, I've seen some pretty unbelievable things, like a study done on like 12 chickens, for example, and that being one of the studies to say genetically engineered crops is a good thing, and it's laughable. But nobody's going to take the time to look at that stuff, right? So there's even studies on studies that show it's pretty consistent that when a scientist is doing work for an industry, that those studies are going to reflect favorably on that product than if it's done independently. Well, it's kind of like what we call conflict of interest. And you hate to say that some scientists are not that ethical, but they might not even realize or think in depth about how they do things. I mean, we have tendencies to be not as objective as we think we'd like to be, right? So it's not that black and white. there's some good stuff out there, and there's some pretty sad stuff out there. People just take it on face value. They don't look at it. I mean, there's a study on, how many birds are destroyed by cats. And I feel like sometimes, of course, cats kill birds, and probably more than we would like, but I think the biggest impact on birds is probably pesticides, because we're basically wiping out their food source by killing insects, and we're poisoning their food source. And when you look at studies on that, it makes sense, and there's a lot of science on it, but if we have one study on cats and birds, and if you look at it and it says assumptions and estimates, then you almost wonder if that's a distraction from the reality of something else. That's what I feel sometimes. I don't think pesticides are the only thing we're doing destructive on this planet by any means, but I think it's a really big one. And a lot of times it can just be changed. Not always, but a lot of times. And I think this is really why this petition will be very, very effective, and I don't see why people would have an issue with it unless they have some vested interest.
Sheryl, where can people go again to sign this petition against the use of herbicides in our forests?
Well, the House of Commons, I believe you can go to the House of Commons and their petitions, and this petition is E2738. So I think if you look for it that way, you'll find it. It's being posted all over the place on Facebook right now, and I believe it'll probably go onto some websites. I just came online this morning, so it's really fresh, hot off the press, as they say, and all that. But I think you can find it if you go that route, if you can't find it anywhere else. There is a paper version as well, so if there are groups and people out there who want to access that so that they can collect paper version for people who are maybe not online as much, there is that possibility. They'll just have to contact us, and we can share that. But yeah, I have a lot of hope that this will at least open up the conversation. There are people in certain provinces across Canada who've been opposed to this for many, many years, and have tried to do something about it. And I hope that this will benefit all Canadians, even if they think it won't.
Sheryl, do you have a website that people can go to?
I did. I haven't I haven't kept it up only because of time, and it takes a lot of time to maintain a good website. There is some really good websites out there, though. Like for particular in forestry spraying, there's one for New Brunswick, there's one for Nova Scotia, and in BC there's the Stop the Spray BC website. They all have good information about herbicide spraying and forestry, and I know they're already starting to share this on their Facebook pages. And then there is also a Saskatchewan website called, okay, I have to think for a minute, Saskatchewan Network for Alternatives to Pesticides. And I feel the lady that runs that page puts a lot of really excellent information on her page. I think people don't know it exists because it's kind of maybe a more obscure name. So I feel I'd be repeating what people are doing and not focusing on what I'm trying to do in my own little world, I guess you could say. I have experience with certain things, so I want to focus on that right now. Right now I'm trying to access some information that I intend to share with many journalists. I haven't got that information yet, but once I do, you'll be hearing about it.
Sheryl, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
My guest has been Sheryl McCumsey, founder of Pesticide Free Alberta. She was speaking to us from Powell River, British Columbia, a beautiful part of the world, and we hope to keep it that way if we could stop this spraying. If you have any questions for Sheryl or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@housestreet.com Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.